Welcome to your Health Facts. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the early signs of dementia. These signs can be really subtle and a lot of people overlook them, but recognizing them early is really important for getting the right treatment and support.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that dementia isn't just one single disease. It's actually an umbrella term for a bunch of different conditions that affect our cognitive function. Things like our memory, our thinking, and even our behavior. And these symptoms, they come from damage to brain cells, which ultimately makes it harder for people to do those everyday activities that we all take for granted.
Right. And I think one of the most common signs that we hear about is memory loss. But it's not just a typical forgetfulness, like where you misplace your keys or you forget an appointment. It goes beyond that. We're talking about forgetting recent conversations or asking the same question over and over again. And it gets to a point where it really starts to impact your daily life and your independence. That's when it's definitely time to see a doctor.
Absolutely. Another early sign that can be pretty concerning is having trouble finding the right words. We all have those tip of the tongue moments, but for someone in the early stages of dementia, this happens a lot more often. They might struggle to come up with the right word, or they might use the wrong word altogether. It can even get so bad that they start to avoid conversations because they're embarrassed or frustrated.
That makes sense. And I know that apathy or a lack of motivation can also be a sign, which I think can be easy to miss, especially if someone's always been a homebody. But we're talking about people who used to love hobbies and social events, and suddenly they just don't care anymore. They'd rather stay home all the time. And they've lost interest in things they used to enjoy. It can look a lot like depression, so it's really important to look at the bigger picture, especially if it's not going away.
Another thing that people might not realize is that frequent falls can actually be an early sign of dementia, especially Alzheimer's disease. Research shows that older adults who are later diagnosed with Alzheimer's often have a higher risk of falls in the years before their diagnosis. These falls are usually things like tripping, stumbling, or just losing their balance out of nowhere. So while not everyone who falls a lot will develop dementia, it's definitely something to pay attention to, particularly if you're seeing some of those other cognitive changes we've talked about.
Right. And then there's disorientation,
Yeah.
which again goes beyond just forgetting directions. It's more like suddenly being confused in places that should be familiar, like having trouble getting to the grocery store or a friend's house or even their own bedroom. And that can be a sign that their brain is having trouble processing spatial information, which makes it harder to navigate.
Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of things that can be disruptive, changes in sleep patterns can also be a big red flag. Things like insomnia, waking up a lot during the night, having trouble falling asleep, or even being really sleepy during the day. These can all be signs of early dementia. And in some cases, like with Lewy body dementia, people might even have really unusual sleep behaviors, like moving around suddenly or talking in their sleep, or even acting out their dreams. And you can imagine how disruptive that can be, not just for the person with dementia, but for their loved ones as well.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the physical changes, like stooped posture and difficulty walking, which a lot of people just chalk up to getting older. But when those physical changes happen alongside cognitive issues, it could definitely be a sign of dementia, because dementia can actually affect motor coordination and balance.
Right. And then there's the struggle with routine tasks, the kinds of things that most of us do without even thinking, like making a meal, or paying bills, or following a recipe. When those things suddenly become overwhelming or confusing, that's a sign that the brain is having trouble processing information and carrying out those actions. And it can be really frustrating for people to lose those abilities.
Another thing to look out for is a change in someone's social behavior. Like if they're not as interested in conversations anymore, or they're not really participating in social gatherings, they might even stay silent when they're in groups. Now, this could be because of shyness, or maybe they're just tired. But it's important to think about whether there could be some cognitive changes happening that are affecting how they interact with people.
There are even some changes in eye movement and gaze that can be linked to cognitive decline. Studies have actually shown that in people with dementia. The non-vascularized area in the center of the retina, which is basically like a dead zone, it starts to expand. And sometimes doctors can see this during a regular eye exam, even years before any noticeable Alzheimer's symptoms show up. And then as dementia progresses, people might start to lose their depth perception or have trouble judging distances. And they might even have a vacant or unfocused stare.
It's important to remember that these signs on their own, they don't necessarily mean someone has dementia. But if you're noticing several of these changes in yourself or someone you know, it's definitely a good idea to talk to a doctor. Early detection is key when it comes to managing symptoms and getting the right support. So if you're looking for more information about brain health and well-being, make sure to subscribe to yourhealthfacts.com//